Back on the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast, Laramie Sandquist. He is Senior AVP of Risk Management with Nationwide Agribusiness, talking about severe weather that brings a host of potential challenges for farmers. Of course, Laramie, you know, here in Ohio, warmer weather brings a greater possibility of strong storms, tornadoes, hail, floods. The time for severe weather preparation on your farm is now. But what does that entail? That's what we're going to cover here today with Laramie. Good to see you and welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ty. I appreciate it.
So we're talking about preparedness for emergency situations, especially during severe weather. What does a plan look like on the farm as far as being ready for situations like I talked about earlier?
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about severe weather, that's obviously changed over the last 5 years of what that could look like. Obviously, we always remember the hail, we always remember the tornadoes, but now we've got a lot of these severe convective storms, as they're called in the business, and just these heavy straight line winds that are coming through, and really trying to manage through all of this stuff. And it seems like the Midwest here is takes the brunt of it as we go through. But it has changed our outlook on it. It has changed the way that we prepare for these things, and it has changed the way that we prep everything that we have from our facilities to our emergency action plans to our equipment and really how we're managing the whole farm risk from that perspective.
You mentioned the emergency plans. What are the basic elements of an emergency plan when it comes to the farm?
Yeah, it's first and foremost, it's taking a look at everything that you have there, you know, everything that you have from a structural standpoint, everything you have from a equipment standpoint, and then just an operational standpoint and saying, all right, how are we prepared if disaster strikes? I always tell people, hey, if you were to wake up in the morning or come in the aftermath of a tornado and say, there's nothing here, where do you start? And so it starts with knowing your operations, knowing your facility, but then it's like knowing your cleanup and knowing how to rehab and get back up and running as quickly as possible. When you talk with our claims folks, first and foremost, our main job after the event of a tragic tornado or things like that is to get folks back up and running as quickly as possible. So what are those key operations that we have to focus on first? And how do we manage that ahead of time so that we have the right suppliers, that we have the right manufacturers lined up, that we have the right cleanup crews lined up, whatever it entails for your individual operation.
Seems after these major storms blow through that compared to commercial or residential buildings that farm buildings often get the most damage. Why would that be?
Yeah, historically, you know, we looked at surveys across the country, work with different companies to give us information about building codes and what kind of structures are up to code. And only about 30% of the country is really held to building codes. And you look in the ag community, the rural community, there's not a lot of codes that are out there. So sometimes the structural integrity from previous generations hasn't been as strong as some of the codes now that are up and running today. And some of the buildings that were built just aren't there to withstand 80 to 120 mile an hour straight line winds anymore. And so there's some of that where it's just historically we haven't seen events like this in the past. And so looking at your individual structures themselves to say, okay, if I do get that 80 mile an hour wind, how susceptible am I? If I do get that 100 mile an hour wind, how susceptible am I to it? I think we all know a tornado is going to probably be pretty devastating wherever it goes through. But I think what most folks are looking at is these strong hail events where you're getting this golf ball to even baseball size hail, and then also these strong straight line wind events. These are the ones that are taking people off guard that they really haven't prepared for in the past.
So, what are the keys as we get to building more weather resilient farm structures? What do they look like?
Yeah, as you look at just the building itself, making sure that the roof is reinforced, making sure that the walls are reinforced, making sure that the actual structure of the building itself, if there's needed reinforcement there, making sure it's all tied together. What we say is like a lot of times, you know, as you're building a commercial structure, a lot of the commercial contractors are building it to a code. And we've asked a lot of our farm customers the same thing is as you're building your structures or reinforcing your structures, you don't have to follow the code verbatim, but how is that code different from the way you currently have your building structured? And is there an opportunity for reinforcement based off of what you currently have? So we know there is a lack of code that's out there, but or at least code enforcement in various areas. But if we can get to a certain standard, that's obviously going to be better for everyone as a whole.
We're seeing more severe weather. We're seeing that severe weather even earlier in the year and later in the year, and that gives even greater value to the relationship that farmers should have with their insurance agent. What would a communication look like between a farmer and their agent before God forbid a tragedy happens and after that storm rolls through?
Yeah, that relationship, obviously, with your agent and making sure that you have a plan in place ahead of time is so key. Because after the fact, we know it's chaotic. We know that you want to fall back on something that's concrete, something that you can just pick up out of the remnants of what you have left, hopefully electronic, so you can just access it via, some type of mobile device or something that's saved out there to say, here's what I want this to look like. But we did do a survey of farmers here recently, and we'll put that data out later this year. But some of the main takeaways from that is, 80% of those folks have experienced adverse weather events to the tune of about $250,000 in damages on average. And most of those folks, 65% of them, didn't have a plan in place as to what to do after the fact. And so at that point, it is really relying on the agent relationship and then also your carrier and your claims professionals on, hey, who do I contact and how do I get back up and running as quickly as possible? And I think I mentioned that earlier on is that, your main goal once the disaster strikes is to be ready as quickly as you can get back up and running, because that lapse in time to mobilize, contractors and mobilize demolition crews and mobilize alternative ways to get your product to market or whatever it happens to be, that time is money. And so the better we can prepare on the front end for when that disaster strikes, hopefully decreases that time of restoration. We call it the period of restoration on the back end, so that you just back up and running as quickly as possible.
A lot of great resources online. Where can someone watching or listening find information about preparing farms for severe weather?
Yeah, as you look out at our Ag Insight Center, nationwide.com/AIC. We've got a ton of good articles out there, a lot of different checklists and things that people can use from that perspective. So trying to keep people up to speed with what's out there and also really just framing that mindset of preparation is key to being back up and running as quickly as possible on the back end.
Great information helping us be prepared for what we know is going to be some severe weather here over the next few months across Ohio and really across the Midwest. Laramie Sandquist is Senior AVP with Nationwide Agribusiness. Always great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ty.
Find previous podcasts at ohiofarmbureau.org and search podcast.